and was a multi millionaire. I don't know if was he a billionaire or?
Well, when I knew him, he was worth $600 million, and that was in his 60s. So if you were to amortize that out today's dollars, he was a billionaire.
Oh,
yes.
In today's money, he certainly was.
Right.
So, what was it like being around W. Clement Stone?
It was quite exciting. He was always positive. I mean, to a fault. You just began to question, was he normal? But he wasn't. And that was his strength. I mean, he literally believed the world was plotting to do him good. We used to call him an inverse paranoid. Literally. I mean, I think he's the guy who coined the phrase. I've been told this, and I believe it. If life hands you a lemon, squeeze it and make lemonade, which was a kind of a more common way of Napoleon Hill's statement, which was, inside of every negative event is the seed of an equal or greater benefit. And he would always believe that. I mean, people came in to rip him off, and they would be so, because we had a foundation that I worked for him where he gave away a lot of money. And some people just came to see if they could scam him for the money. And by the time they left, they were so impressed with the idea that he really believed they could do something legitimate that they would go out and do it. And he was a character, and he was a genius trainer. He trained people not by words but by action, by taking them out, modeling for them what good sales looked like. He was in the insurance industry. And he would go in, he would sell someone with a new recruit watching, and then he'd say, okay, what'd you see me do? And they'd tell him, and he'd say, well, you missed 3 things, and here's what they are. Next time we go in, just watch for those 3 things. And he'd take the person back, have another cup of coffee, and say, did you see those 3 things? He said, yes. So they'd be walking into the next one, and just inside the door, he'd say, this one's yours. And the guy would freak, but he'd say, no, come on, do it. And so he'd do it and probably miss 3 things, and they'd go out for coffee and say, what'd you miss? And if they knew, great. If they didn't, he'd tell them. Then he'd go and he'd do those 3 things perfectly for them again. Well, by the end of the day, he had a perfect salesman. They were confident. They knew what to do. And he trained hundreds of people that way and built a huge insurance industry, and eventually taught his training techniques to others that do it. So he was truly a gifted genius.
Well, that book, Success Through Positive Mental Attitude, was really influential in my life, and so when I learned a few years ago that you knew him and worked with him, I've always wanted to ask you a little bit more. Any other anecdotes about him that are worth sharing?
Well, I remember one day we were in his office, and he went over to the side of his desk, and he just inadvertently, we thought, knocked a book on the floor. And he kept talking. And eventually he said, none of you are listening, are you? And we said, no. And he said, why not? He says, because we're wondering if you're going to pick the book up off the floor. And he said, you've got to be very careful about leaving people incomplete. They always want completion. And I know today in NLP they talk about closing loops and all that. You could probably speak more effectively about that. But he was a kind of a natural psychologist who just understood everything. And he was a great philanthropist. He gave away millions and millions of dollars. And one of the nice things about working at the foundation is we get a buzz on the phone, and someone from the Stone office would say, he just bought 100 tickets to the such-and-such ball. You're all welcome to go for free if you want. So we went to some of the most amazing events in Chicago for free when I was in my early 20s. I was just amazed. And he always, you'd see him, and he'd say, how are you going? Terrific! The only answer that was appropriate was terrific. And at first, it felt phony to me. But after a while, if you say it long enough, things really are terrific. And so you've got to go through that stage almost of like not believing a technique will work until it does. And then all of a sudden you go, wow, that's not faking it till you make it. That really works,
Well, I actually have a lot of people who, when I talk to them about focusing on what you want, they'll write me and say, well, I tried this focusing on what I want, but I feel like such a phony. Mm-hmm. Because while I'm sitting there thinking about what I want to be, I know that I'm a loser and that I'm this and I'm that, and then I get a chance for the second time to explain the principle to them, taking into account that misperception. And with the people that stick with me and keep coming back to me with all their objections, pretty soon I cover every objection they can think of, and they pretty much don't have any choice but to start focusing on what they want.
Right. Well, one of the things that one of my mentors once said is we give way too much credence to reality. She said because reality is simply something we created.
Absolutely.
And as long as you realize you're a creator, we're all made in the image of the Creator, if you believe any of the great religious texts in the world, then what happens is the reality we're currently living with is simply one we created. And so we get to either focus on that and have more of it, or focus on the reality we want and create that. And most people think that, statistics say that, 80% of marriages end in divorce or whatever, therefore, I have an 8 in 10 chance. And so that's what they start to believe, and sure enough, they create it, as opposed to saying, well, that's just a statistic of what God created in the past. I'm different, we know more, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to create it my way. And that's, it's what you do every day. It's what I do every day. It's what all of us who are teaching this stuff do. It's why we're the teachers, because we live it.
Yeah, it's really a challenge for people when they're going in the direction where they're focusing a lot on what they don't want and getting it, to believe that they're actually doing that. And part of that is that they're really unconscious about what they're doing inside that's creating the reality. A lot of what I do is I try to show them that unconscious process so that they can go, oh, so they start looking inside their own head and noticing what they're doing and the effect that it has on, most people know intellectually that, the people that have been in personal growth, they know that beliefs manifest themselves in reality. But until someone actually looks inside their own head and watches a belief create a certain reality, they don't really know it on an experiential level. It's just information. And I see people all the time who nod and smile as, someone like you or someone like me or some of the other people we know expresses certain basic principles, and then I see them, the group takes a break, and I see them violating them 2 minutes after they were nodding their head about them.
Well, you and I know that information is not enough to change behavior.
No.
And it takes an experience. That's what Moshe Feldenkrais taught us with his body work. And when the body and the mind experiences something better, it naturally goes toward that. I mean, if you've slept in a heavenly bed in a Westin hotel, you come home to your crappy bed, you go, I think I'd rather have that other bed. And so basically, we will tend to move toward that which we have experienced as better. So I think what I do in my workshops anyway is to give people 7 days of experiencing what it's like to live in a constantly positive, loving, self-affirming, responsibility-taking, goal-seeking, reinforcing environment. And as people do that, it begins to become internalized. And if we give them the tools to practice, they continue it. And I think the other thing that I would say, why I love meditation so much, and for years I practiced a form called Vipassana, which is a Buddhist technique of watching not just your thoughts, but any sensation, wherever your awareness goes. You watch your thoughts for 10 days in a row in a retreat, and you become pretty clear that most of it sucks. It's really negative. And so you begin to become conscious and intentional about it. But most of us are so out of awareness, we're not even aware we're thinking. And so the concept of meditation day after day after day, and learning to be in the witness position and the observer, and then beginning to realize, wait a second, just because a thought comes through, I don't have to get on that boat and go down that river. I can let it go by, and I can now choose to think a more conscious thought. One of my teachers says that it's only that our highest goal is how we feel, and our feelings are created by our thoughts. And so when we're not feeling well, or not getting what we want, then the only question to ask is, what thought would make me feel better? What thought would take me closer to my goal?
Yeah, I think awareness is really kind of the bedrock of the whole thing. One of the things that I teach is that you can only create something that does not serve you if you do it unconsciously. If you really watch the creation of something that's harmful to you, watch what you're doing inside to create it, you really cannot finish creating it. And so as long as people stay unconscious, they can keep doing the same terrible stuff to themselves for their whole life. But once they have that kind of awareness, so and Vipassana is certainly one way to do it. People do it in a really accelerated way when they use Holosync every day.